Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Julie, and this week my guest is Philippa Kelly. So Philippa, you and I have spent a year doing this podcast together, and a few weeks ago you interviewed me about how come I am a play therapist and I'm working in the way I'm working. And so today is the return, where I'm going to be asking you, how come, Philippa, you've ended up working with children and families with play? And you're quite nervous. It's what I'm picking up. In fact, I'm more than picking it up. I think anybody looking at me, if you were watching, you'd see Philippa you've lost your bounce a bit this morning. And even in our preparation, I could really sense this is making you far more nervous than our usual conversations or your interviews. So there's something different going on for you when today the focus is on you. And I'm really picking up that's changing something for you. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. When we agreed to do this, I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. We've talked, but we haven't really talked about why we do what we do and how we've ended up where we are. And we've got 30 plus years of experience each. Yeah, that story seems reasonable to tell along the way, and that might be interesting to some people. And it was a really good idea. And I interviewed you, and that was no problem. And then it was going to be my turn. And I was, started to think about how do I talk about myself? It's really hard for me. So then we said, oh, we were going to do a 50th episode. So that gave me a bit of a break because we've done that in between, haven't we? So that again was fine because we were talking about what we'd learned from our guests. And that for me, like talking, anybody who knows me, hopefully people from the podcast realize that having a conversation is not really an issue for me. I don't lack in confidence really in any way. Obviously I get nervous about things, but I'm pretty resilient in being able to overcome any like niggles or that. But the thought of talking about myself has, I've spent my drives to and from work thinking about how do I say this? How do I talk about it? And that's not because nothing, but my career has actually been very blessed. I've been absolutely amazing. I think what I struggle with is feeling that I have value in the conversation, that my experience, like my experience, not like when I'm having the conversation with somebody else or my knowledge really, but my view, my personal view. I think that, and that my personal knowledge maybe isn't as valuable as, or that people might not be interested in it, or I don't have much. And so it's really made me think about how I tell my story. And actually, I'm going to tell my story through how other people have supported, influenced, and what I've gained from significant people along the way.
So for this episode, you've planned or structured what you're going to say. And normally, although we do have a plan and we do have an outline structure, we never keep to it. So we gave up with that quite early on. We get the gist of what we're going to say. And it's the same with your interviews. You don't have a structure and a list of questions, but you manage very skillfully, I think, to wander through a topic with somebody and it having great meaning. But there's something today about the focus being on you as Philippa and not just you as Philippa, the professional, that's causing you to act in quite a different way. And one of those ways is you've needed to structure things.
Yeah, I've really thought, and you're right. Yeah, you're right. I do my training and I might have PowerPoint slides, but I just know what I need to say through the 4 or 5 hours, and I know that I'll get there in some way. Do you know what I mean? And the slides were there because people like slides and people, but actually, I really don't have any idea what's going to come out of my mouth, and every training is different. I know the general topic I'm talking about, and I know generally the points that I need to get across, but each training I do, each would be different because the stories I tell, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a real good story today, and it just comes in. So it's not, yeah, I very rarely structure what I do because my brain doesn't work in that way. But yeah, this one I've really thought about how I want to tell this, yeah, really have. And that's imposter syndrome. And I guess we did have a conversation about that, and I think that was one of the things that maybe we thought we would share, is about why that is for me. And that is because I thought I was a stupid kid. I was really good at sports. So that got me through school till I was 13, and I moved schools. But up until I was 13, I was really good at sports. I was not the best. There was always people that were better than me at swimming, rounders, netball. But I was always good enough to make the team. I was always good enough to go to away matches, to be included, to be one.
Yeah.
So there was this. So I had sports that I was good, and I knew I was good at it. Like I say, I was never the best in any of them. I was never going to be professional, but I was good enough. But my family were really intelligent in general knowledge. And I still to this day, I have no idea who the kings and queens are in our country. I have no idea of capital cities or rivers that run through, or sometimes even where some of the counties are in our. I know the north because I live in the Midlands in the north, but I have no idea like the difference between Sussex and Essex. For as far as, do you know what I mean? I know they're down the south somewhere, but I've not really much idea about it. So general knowledge, general things like that is really difficult for me. And I remember once we played Trivial Pursuit in our family. I never got a cheese. Never. I was terrible. But I remember once answering this question about who wrote Winnie the Pooh. And I knew the answer because my dad had read Winnie the Pooh to me as a child. And I really liked Winnie the Pooh. And my family was so shocked that they were like, are you cheating? Is the book somewhere? And they were joking about it. But that reinforced this, that you're not clever.
Not clever in that way.
Yeah. But that for me was that I was stupid. So I left school with no exams. I actually wrote swear words on my papers, on my exam papers. And yeah. And so I got a U's in them because I'd put my name in this swear word, something
ungraded. Yeah.
I did that for about 4, and then they stopped me at the gate and said, are you going to answer the questions or do what you've been doing? And I said, I'm going to do what I've been doing. So they said, well, maybe it's best that you don't continue.
That's the exams that in the UK we do around the age of 16.
Yeah.
That it would have been O levels, CSEs, now GCSEs. And when you were writing those swear words, which we're not saying, but I know what the swear words are, and was that I noticed you're smiling as you're saying it, but you're also grimacing.
Yeah.
At 16, you must have known the consequence of that, which is I'm not going to get any formal exams, and I didn't. Graded.
But I didn't think I was going to get any exams anyway. I moved schools when I was 13 to a school that didn't do sports. So I literally stopped going. I did go. I liked the social side of school to a degree. I'd moved to a new school at 14. So that was really hard. And I ended up having a fight with the popular girls because they cornered me, and I'd been friends with some of the lads just because they were in a class that I was in. There was nothing to it. They were just the people that talked to me. That was it. They just talked to me, and I was just needed somebody to talk to. I was 14 in a school. I'd moved across Stoke-on-Trent, so I'd moved. I was completely left. All my friends. I'd moved from one side of Stoke to the other. And when you lived in Stoke, you just didn't travel from one town to another. There's 5 towns that make Stoke up, and you just didn't do it in those days. You just stayed in your town. So I did have some friends, and I made friends as I went through, who lived near me, who not really were in my school, but they pinned me up against a wall and said, "Leave these lads alone," as girls do. It was just so I ended up headbutting this girl. So they left me alone. Then I stood my ground. I'd got the resilience, but sport had given me that. I didn't. I could have easily have been bullied. And I suppose, there was that underlying meanness, but they never really, it didn't really go that far because I was confident in myself. I wasn't confident in my academic abilities.
So
And
there's a difference there between confidence in what other people are measuring, like in an exam or in a Trivial Pursuit game, and then confidence as in yourself,
yeah,
in not just your sporting achievements, but just you as Philippa, as a decent human being. It didn't rock that sense for you.
it was hard. It was hard. And I hate it. So I didn't go to school a lot of the time. I did for the subjects where the teacher was engaged, or I was interested, or I'd got people in the class that talked to me. And then I went to school. I went to chemistry because the teacher just absolutely didn't teach us. And these lads were in there, and we just messed about and made all these concoctions, and it was pretty dangerous, really. Did things with that static ball, and there was like, so I had a really great time in chemistry and physics because this teacher just checked out for whatever reason. So I went to those lessons, but for others I didn't. So when the exams came, I hadn't done any revision. I didn't think I was ever going to pass. There was never a moment in my mind where I thought I was going to get a qualification. Even the school had said to me, the most you can hope for is to be a lithographer, which is
What's that?
so in the pot banks. So we've talked about before. So where the pots are made, they don't exist really anymore. So
Pots as in clay pots.
yeah, so Stoke-on-Trent was got Dalton and Spode, where all your crockery comes from.
Okay.
Yeah, and on there, on your crockery, you get patterns and transfers.
Yeah.
And a lithographer is somebody who puts on the detail. And it's quite a skilled job, I have to say. So what they were saying is that's the best you're ever going to get, is to be that skilled. That is a level of skill that you're going to achieve. Because it wasn't even sports in this school. If I'd stayed in the other school, I probably would have gone down the sports route, because they did encourage me. They did take me. Yeah, they were really in the sports stuff. And I did the classes because I had to do that in order to access sport. But it also gave me lots of time away from that. I could swim at lunch times. If there was training, I left geography and did do you know what I mean? So I had lots of break from that academic stuff.
So, two questions. One question, and maybe I think I know the answer to this, that the reason you changed from one school to the other was your parents' choice, not your choice.
Yeah,
So we
yeah,
had
absolutely.
that. Because I was thinking, Philip, I think we've spoken about that in my interview. I also changed school at 14, and music was my thing, but it was the opposite way round. I hadn't done very well in the first 3 years of secondary school, and I realized I wasn't going to be able to do music as an exam or as a subject after the age of 14 at my school. So my mum really pushed for me to go to another school. And actually, I really thrived in that second school. So we've got some similarities, but that difference. But the big question that's in my head at the moment is hang on, you became a social worker and a family therapist and a therapy practitioner. How did you manage that if you left school with no exams? So tell us that story.
Yeah, so then I moved out of Stoke-on-Trent. I was never going to leave Stoke, never ever. And I did. I was just like, oh, I'm out. So I moved to a hospital in Hertfordshire.
Well,
a hospital as a care assistant in Hertfordshire for adults with learning and physical needs who actually had been these people wouldn't have been in hospital nowadays. They were placed in kind of the 1950s where things like learning disabilities and that were deemed to be a problem, not seen as just neurodiverse and maybe you need some support. So they're placed in hospital. So I went there, and actually when I went there I met the first start of the circle of my closest friends. So Emma, I was 18 when I met her, and she's still my bestest friend now. Do you know what I mean? I still see her, we still walk together, and she really looked after me because I was on a path that was one way and she was on a path that was another. And she just used to put me to bed and say, don't get out of bed until the morning, and really looked after me and supported me and was my friend regardless of anything. And I also met my son's dad there, and he's still my closest friend now. So I made some really close friends there. And so I settled down into life a little bit, and the Community Care Act came in.
Yes.
Where they were moving people out of hospitals into the community. And these social workers, remember, I was only 18, 19 and I was just like, what are you doing? You're just putting these people that I cared about, that I really liked, into a community where they've got, because this hospital that they were in, they had a social clubs, they had shops, they had a village together in this place. And then they were moving them into houses in streets where they had nothing. And actually, in the hospital, they could just go. They had to stay in the grounds, but they could go to the shop. They went to work. They did things, and they were moving them out. And I was 19 and thought, I can do a better job. Really? That was ultimately like, what are you doing? You're just I can do a better job. I'm going to care about these people. I'm going to help them. So I went back to college and did an access to university. Of course, I think you can still do it now. So you have to do your English, your maths, but you don't do any exams. It's all coursework based.
Yeah.
And I did sociology. So I passed them all really well. Apart from because I did the sociology A-level coursework, they said to me, to everybody, you can do the exam if you want because you've done the same coursework.
Okay.
So yeah, okay, I've done the coursework, I'll do it. So I sat there and I failed completely. I failed the exam, but it didn't make any difference to going to university. Coursework was the thing. So I got the coursework and I ended up at Hertfordshire University. But my mum was a social worker.
Okay.
So I was in my social work training, and my mum was helping me with my assignments, and all my family and everybody joked, oh, your mum's getting a second degree.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that story of Philippa not being very clever, we're the clever ones, not Philippa. And basically your mum's writing your essays for you, so it's not you doing it.
Yeah. And they didn't think about it like that. I think hopefully my mum won't listen to this podcast. If she did, it would upset her, I think. But really, that was, yeah. So I got passed my social work qualification and I moved back to Staffordshire. Luckily, my Emma, who I'd met in Hertfordshire, also came from Staffordshire, and she'd come back a few years earlier. So she only lives not far from me. Now we moved back and I did social work, and I was really, so this is, I guess, the first time like where I feel that I just met some people that kind of really saw something in me that I didn't and really helped me. So I ended up on, at the time, it was called an intake and assessment team. So in social work, it was the changeover at the time. There was something called an orange book. So I used to do an orange book assessment. And just as I was becoming a social worker, it was moving from the orange book to something called the core assessment, which is what they do now. And they do, at the time, it was a 7-day assessment. And then if children and families needed more support, it went on to the longer core assessment. So the team that I was on, I have to say, is when I went to university, I was never going to work with children. I didn't go to any of the children's lectures because that was the one area that I knew I wasn't going to work in. And it's the only thing I haven't done.
It's the only thing. The universe was teaching you something else, Philippa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I then met, my team manager was called Richard, and there was 3 women in there, Jill, Faye, and Sheila. And it was an assessment team, intake and assessment team. So anything that was coming in through the door came into our team in quite a big geographic area. So some things were just, we don't have any food. And so in those days, there was something called Section 17 monies. So we'd go shopping and help get some food and feed families. Sometimes people needed help to get kids to nursery. We'd do that. Sometimes families needed support for lots of different reasons. And we'd do the assessment, do some support. If they needed further support, in theory, it went to another team. It often stayed for a bit longer. And then there was the higher end stuff of, nowadays it'd be called safeguarding, and then child protection. At the time, there was safeguarding really wasn't a word. It was just child protection. So it was the things where children were deemed to be at significant risk or significant harm, either in the moment or like if that harm was likely to occur. So I was really, what I got from this group of people was, one, I was very protected. I didn't know that at the time, but now with hindsight, I know that they gave me work and families that built my skills, and they supported me really well in building those skills. And the biggest thing that I think I got from them was about communication. And that communication is about listening to family stories, even if you are having to say a child can't remain at home for whatever reason, maybe because there's domestic violence or mental health, or there's been some physical or neglectful parenting, and you're saying, actually, for this moment in time, a child's not safe to be here. Not just kind of going through a tick box of, I've met all the criteria, we've met the threshold, because it's a threshold criteria, we can now go to court and remove your child. What they taught me was the importance of listening, and just listening to a family's story, a mom, a dad, a granny's. And if that took all afternoon, then that took all afternoon. You just sat there, and sometimes it was hard because people were mean to you, calling you all the effing names under the sun, and because they were mad and they were cross. But that's again what I learned from them, was that wasn't about me. And I was only in my 20s then. And so it feels really personal when somebody's saying you are this and this, But this group of people really helped me to reflect on, why are they saying that? Would you say anything any different if that was happening to you? And maybe what we need to be able to do is, I'm still going to go to court or still ask them to place the child in foster care for a little bit of time, but I can do it with compassion, with an understanding, with a view that these families are doing the best they can in the moment that they're in. And unless you hear their story, you can't always hold that. And really, that's what I learned. And I learned it really well from watching them do it. And then from them listening to me and really gently giving me this bit of reflection about, why is that happening? Why? And that is something now that I still hold as why.
Yeah, what's behind that? What is really being conveyed here?
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a sideline. My knowledge of you over, I don't know, we've known each other about 7 years, something like that, is that's a huge part of your practice still now, is listening to the story, not just of the child, but of the wider family. And I'm wondering, is that you were taught that, not so much taught it as in a lesson, but taught it through the example of the more senior members of staff in that social work team. So that's such a different way of learning, which is the learning by practice, the learning through example, and that learning by somebody being alongside you. And is that something in your work as a supervisor, I don't know if you've been a practice educator, but is that something in how you work with younger members of professions now?
Yeah,
Quite
I would.
consciously.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm doing therapy supervision, and somebody's got a list of games that they're playing. That's one of the first questions I ask is, why are you doing that? Why are you doing cotton ball hockey? What is it you want from this? What is the reason? What are you hoping the kid's going to
Story
get from it?
behind it.
You know, why it might be a great activity, and it might be just because you're having fun, but why? Why are you doing
Yeah.
it? Because the families, I guess, that I worked with in that time also taught me that if you listen, you can connect and they will connect with you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they can still be mad at you, and that, so, and they can still not want you to do it. But if you've got a compassion for them, and that it's not about excusing behavior, but you can be compassionate. And I have to say, there are some situations where I know that I don't hold that. There are, and within that team, I learned what they talked about was omission and commission. So omission being that you're doing the best you can at the moment, and the omission is that you don't have the other skills, the other capacity, the other resources to be able to do anything different. And that might be because of mental health, it might be because of addiction, it might be because of domestic violence, but there's an omission, and you're doing absolutely the best you can.
Yeah.
There are some situations where it's never omission, it's always commission. And so that is, you have unpurposely created a situation to perpetrate that abuse, or you've unpurposely created that abuse to give you pleasure or entertainment. And I have to be honest, that bit, however much they taught me, even to this day, I find the commission bit very difficult to have compassion for. And that's very hard to, and certainly in my 20s, it was, I think even in my 50s, it's something that I find very difficult. Not impossible. I can work cognitively really hard at it, but I don't think I can feel it in my body. Whereas the emission stuff, I really feel that in my soul. Does that make sense?
You did social work.
Yeah.
in a children's team for quite a while in your 20s. What happened next?
So then we had our son, and I tell you, I went for a job at CAMS. So I wanted to go part-time. And so this job in CAMS came up.
Explain what CAMS, just briefly explain what CAMS
is. So CAMS is a child and adolescent mental health service. So we've done a few episodes back on it. So it's really where children who are struggling, parents who want help around mental health or things like that are referred into. And it's an NHS body, but at the time there was a local authority, a social work post within it, and one came up in Stoke, actually, in Stoke. So I went for this interview, but 3 days before they'd sent you had to do this presentation, and this is not planning. This is me. So they'd sent you this presentation weeks and weeks before that you had to do. You had to do, I think, a 10-minute presentation on a book that was based in CAMS. It was like the working together document one for social work, but it wasn't called that. Together, it was called something like Together We Stand or something like that. But it was primarily like their guidelines for CAMS. I'd never heard of it, never seen, didn't even know it existed. 3 days before, I thought, oh, I better have a look at what I've meant to do. And I'm like, bloody hell, I've got to do this presentation. So I just ring the social worker in a CAMS team in Stafford and said, do you have a copy of this book? And she's, yeah, I said, can I borrow it? Because I'm going for this interview. So she lent it to me, but the woman who was interviewing me, one of the women she obviously her manager, and she'd rung and said, oh, you've got this one coming, but she hadn't even read the book. Anyway, I did read the book and I did do a presentation and it went well. And the feedback was we were so surprised because you hadn't read the book, but actually it was a really good presentation. But the psychiatrist was there, so he was named Dr. Lovett. So he was part of the NHS and he was the clinical lead of the team, and he was going to be my supervisor. So he asked, so they all, you know how they are, they take it in turns asking you questions.
Yes.
And he asks me a safeguarding question. And I'd answered it, and I don't even remember what it was. And he'd give me a return about it. And I said, no, that's wrong. And actually, that was everyone's face. Yeah.
Well, like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah. And so he gave his view again. And I stuck my ground, and I don't even know what it was. And I gave him the reasons why I felt that he was mistaken and that it wasn't correct. Anyway, Ed Harvey, who was the social work manager, said, okay, we'll leave it there and move on. So I went back to my team, and we were discussing kind of referrals, and I was with the team manager and some of the social workers, and somebody came in and said, Richard, Ed is on the phone for you. So I was like, Richard, I'm really sorry. She's probably ringing up to make a complaint. I didn't mean it. I'm really sorry. And so he's like looking at me. Anyway, he went, had this conversation and came back, and he said, they were just asking for a reference for you. You've got the job. I was like, what? And he said, yeah. Anyway, so the reason I got the job was because I'd stood up to the psychiatrist. And that's when what she was saying is that's what we want, is that, and I wasn't rude, but I was like clear about this was my view, this is your view, and I think you're wrong. And that was what she wanted, really, was that. And I'd done the presentation and I'd done it, I'd met the requirements and all those sorts of things. So I got the job and I was there for a while. And so then you can do some training, or at the time you could do some training. And I wanted to do family therapy training. And this was the next thing I learned, really. So I learned about communication. And then I went to this team and I wanted to do family therapy. And Dr. Lovett said, no, you're not doing family therapy. I don't like family therapy. It doesn't add any value to to the cams. I was like, it does is evidence it. If you want to do it, give me the evidence. So I went away, read a few papers, and came back and gave him some. And then he just, he was very skilled, and he just poofed away everything I'd said. There was a counter argument to everything that I was saying. So I went away again, did a bit more, went back. And again, he was really skilled at count. So then I went away and I really, really found it and went back and spent a whole hour debating with him. And I was able to hold my own. And then he said, yeah, of course you can. Go and do family therapy. And then absolutely supported me all the way through. I had a supervisor and I did my family therapy degree. So he taught me about knowing why you're doing something, and not just the surface bit of really being able to think about what value is this going to add to a family, to a child, to a service, not just the headline of it, but actually why are you. And it's a bit more about the why, but about what is this going to give to your family. That's what he taught me, and it was very powerful, I think.
And is that still part of your practice as well? So from the families and that first social work team, you were really learning about communicating, keeping an open conversation going, especially in omission cases and not in the commission cases, but recognizing that and thinking to yourself, why are they reacting like this? Why are they having a go at me? So you've definitely carried that into your practice now. But Dr. Lovett, and he really pushed you to.
He did, yeah.
To say the why, like to really know what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And perhaps all along he knew full well he was going to tick that box and say, off you go to your family therapy. But he really got you to delve into the depth of it, so you knew it wasn't just the latest trend, oh, I'll do a bit of that. It's to really know why. Have you carried that on in your career since then?
Yeah, because I think again that it taught me to think about, we're going to turn up to families. They're coming to us often in a moment where it's hard for them. They might be in crisis. They might be really struggling. They're very vulnerable, aren't they, in those moments, families? And if you're going to offer something, if you're going to do something, then you really need to understand how that is going to be helpful. And that's what he taught me, to think about, how is family therapy going to be helpful to a family, to a child, to a service? What is that going to add? So when I did Theraplay, when I've done BOS, when I've done leaflets, I'm just learning EMDR, what is it going to add to my practice that I can give to these families? Now, it's not that there are other things that are really great, but they're not going to add anything for the families in relation to how I'm going to work with them, because that's the thing, isn't it? So I could learn CBT and do a really great job and learn CBT, but actually the families that I work with, that really isn't going to be very helpful, because often they're younger, often they can't be in their body, often, do you know what I mean? So I can give you a great argument for why CBT is really great, but I probably couldn't give you a great argument for why it would be good for my little 5-year-old that I'm working with. And I guess that's what he helped me think about, is why did I want to do it? What was it going to add to the families, to my practice, to the service that we worked in?
So that it matters that it's you that's doing the training.
Yes.
And that you're not doing another type of training. That it's you, your clients, and the practice that together is. There's never any guarantees. I know you're using quite. It is going to help those families, but certainly my experience is I can have a real belief in my practice of play therapy, and I have that foundational training, and I have a real passion for that as a way of working with children and young people. but I can never say, and it's going to do this, and it's going to solve that problem, or and it's going to support that challenge. I can hope it is, and I can believe that it's been helpful in other similar cases, but I'm always sitting with that doubt that we're going to give it a fair go.
Yeah.
But it might not be what this child needs.
But I suppose it's knowing that it's going to be more likely to, isn't it? Than like I say, CBT is great. It's a great intervention, but it's actually for the client group that I work with right now. It wouldn't add anything particularly. People may disagree with that. Certainly CBT therapists might, but for me, for who I am, for the families that I work with, it's a lot less likely than doing the building underdeveloped sensory systems or doing something along those lines. So I suppose that's what he taught me, was really to think about, why are you arguing for this case? What is it? And really understand it, not just do the headlines. Well, family therapy does this and this. But why does it do it? What is it going to bring to your practice? What is it going to bring to CAMHS as a service? What is it going to bring to your families? What are you hoping that they will get from this training? And I still think that now, yeah.
Yeah. So when you're you're in a professionals meeting and with a new referral, and there's a sense of, okay, we know this about the child, about the family, or this is what we're seeing externally, this is what the school has said. So we've got the kind of referral information sitting there. And then quite often, hopefully, there are several choices in an organization or a charity or within a school where the resources might be drawn from. Is this a potential theraplay case, a sensory integration case using the bus model, or something to do with Sarah Lloyd's work? Is it life story work? Is it non-directive play therapy? Is it CBT? We've got these several choices, family therapy, and that being able to articulate why you believe something may be helpful to a family.
Yeah.
Is that part of the legacy of Dr. Lovett for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And why not? Why it isn't the right thing? Or in my view, it's not. And it is only my view. But yeah, it really helped me to critically think, I think, would be the buzzword, is that critically thinking. However, my family therapy wasn't straightforward.
Tell us about your training.
So I went to Derby University. They paid for me. And so when I'd done my social work training, I'd again been unstructured in it, and often the weekend before wrote the assignment and I've pretty much sailed through. But I guess the story was I sailed through because I'd got my mum helping me, because she was already a social worker and she'd got the books and she was doing a lot of the work. Nobody I knew did family therapy. Nobody could help me. But I entered the first assignment in the same way, with the weekend before, crack it on with it. At the time, you couldn't Google much. You had to read books, get them from the library. I'd find a few quotes, write it up, handed it in. That was fine.
And handwrite it.
Handwrite it. I had a typewriter. I had like an electronic typewriter it was. Okay. So it was a bit fancier than I had an electronic typewriter when I was, I don't think I got a laptop until I did my master's. So I handed this piece of work in, and then I still can remember it to this day. I was called in to see that my lecturers were called Hilary and Gary. And they were sat on this desk, and it was quite a small room, and I was sat the other side, and my assignment was in front of them, and they slid it a little bit on the table and said, if this is the standard of work that you're going to produce, then this course is not for you. I can still remember those words really clearly.
Ouch.
And I looked at them and then they slid it a little bit more and said, if you want to try again, then you can. But I can't remember what they said then, but you've got to really up your game is really what they were saying. I don't remember, but I
This
just,
is the first assignment.
first assignment, I just smashed it out, like probably with a few drinks of vodka over the thing and smashed it in. Yeah, and they were like, yeah, this is a standard. I can still remember, if this is a standard of work you're going to produce, then this course is not for you, and slid this thing. So I guess for me, that was a moment. It was probably one of the most pivotal moments, really, because I'd fought for family therapy, to do the family therapy degree in CAMS. I'd fought to get into CAMS. And now here I was failing my first assignment, thinking I was stupid. And this was just confirming that I hadn't had any help. I hadn't had my mum helping me. I'd done this on my own, and I'd failed on my own completely, like catastrophically. I wasn't like a few points under. It was a catastrophic, absolutely didn't answer the question, fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was there something about your family's myth about you coming true? It was evidence that, yeah, no, I'm really stupid. I'm really not up for this. So what did you do? Did you stay on the course?
I absolutely did, because I thought, F you, I am doing this.
Okay, so that other part of Philippa that is resilient, knows herself, has a voice, wants to prove people wrong. Not wants to prove people wrong, but wants to say, actually, I don't know if that is true. You found that and you resubmitted that assignment.
Yeah, and actually, they said to me, if I'd resubmitted it, I would have got over 80%. If I'd done the resub,
80. But
so I worked really hard. I worked really hard. And then I worked really hard on all my other assignments. And I some of them I didn't do great in, some of them I did all right in, and I came out with a 2-1. So that was all right. And then, so that really and then I had a really great, in the second year, I had a really amazing supervisor called Julia, and I just wanted, she was a social worker. She still works now in Staffordshire, and I just wanted to be her.
Ooh, okay,
honestly, she just portrayed everything. Like, she was together, she was calm, she was compassionate, she was knowledgeable, and so she supervised me for my second year, and we set up a family therapy clinic in the North Stoke. So we did that 2 days a week, and watching her practice was just, it was just outstanding. When you're like in awe of somebody, I really was in awe of her. She was just amazing at what she did. And she went on to do the practicum and ended up in a service called Sustain, which stupidly they didn't have any money for, because the government doesn't fund, and they had to get rid of it. But it was a really great service based with family therapies. But so I did that, and I did my degree, and then I went to a Tier 4 service.
Tier 4? Tell me what.
So that's a Tier 4 in CAMS. And again, I went for this interview. It's a hospital for children.
So this is higher level needs. So
they're sectioned under the Mental Health Act.
Right.
They were sectioned under the Mental Health Act and an eating disorder unit. And loads of people were like, don't go there. It's terrible. It'll be horrendous. Don't go. And that bit of me was like, I'm going then, aren't I?
So I'm going. Yeah.
It was like, I'm going. Yeah. So I went actually I went for the job as a trainee family therapist. That was what they offered. The role was trainee family therapist. And I went for that and I went for the interview, but they offered me the social work manager role. And that sounds a lot grander than it was because there was no social workers there. They'd all left. But I went there and that taught me to be less certain.
Oh.
Which Jonathan, Dr. Lovett, had taught me to be very certain and very clear and very critical, that critical thinking. I then went to tier 4 and it was a medical model. It was completely a medical model. And I was supposed to be the kind of the social voice. And I learned there, I really started to develop my understanding of attachment and systems. So when I'd done family therapy, systems was and narrative therapy was what I'd been interested in. So they allowed me to do some family therapy and still do some training there, but primarily my role was as social worker. But yeah, so that taught me to be less certain and to be able to incorporate different models, that you could have kind of a medical model and a social model together, that often they needed one another at these times. And it was hard. That was hard because the treatment was very cognitive, like the opposite of where I am really. I still am, which is the kind of, I suppose, in my body, in that connection. And that's probably why I do therapy and those kind of little things. So the medical model at that time, I don't know if it's different now, but was very cognitive. We'll give a tablet, we'll give some medication, we'll give an injection, we'll put a structure in place. We won't touch. There was no touch when I went there. Lots of restraints. There was a school. It was very clinical, is what I would say. But there was lots of people there who were really invested and worked really. It was a really hard job because you've got children who were very poorly and often very violent with their illness, because they were scared and they were frightened and they didn't know where they were and they didn't know what was going on.
They could have died. Did any of your patients die in that time?
I don't remember that. No, I don't remember that happened. But they were very ill. Some were psycho. So some on the initial assessment where they were under a 28-day section, they had extreme psychosis or really horrendous self-harm and things like that. And the eating disorder unit, there were children that were on death's door and needing to be fed in a way that was intrusive, I suppose. It was. So for me, coming from a place of we need to communicate, we need to sit, we need to be, to a place of we're going to give a medication, we're going to structure the day, we're going to restrain these kids, and that was what it felt like for me in a very chaotic, high stressed environment. But what I learned is that actually you can have a both and. Do you know what I mean? That actually sometimes you need medication to help therapy, to help somebody access the therapy. Do you know what I mean? That they're so depressed or they're so anxious or their psychosis is so bad that they need that medication in order to then access the therapy that you can bring in. And you can bring in kind of the touch and care and all those sorts of things, but sometimes being held in a way that restrained them from hurting themselves or hurting somebody else was still necessary. Because, do you know what I mean? And that was always awful to see, but sometimes it was necessary. Otherwise, they were going to smash their head open because they were headbutting it so hard on a glass. And the only way to stop that was to hold them. So, do you know what I mean? So there was the both. So you could bring in that actually we can give you a hug in a very controlled way, but you can have that touch, you can hold hands, you can. But there are, and that was really important, but there are still times when there needed to be interventions that stopped children from really seriously damaging themselves. So that both and I think I learnt there.
Yeah, that less certain and that professional respect for other interventions, for other ways of being with a young person when they're in such huge distress and working alongside other professionals.
Yeah. And working
Yeah,
alongside nurses and the knowledge that they had and brought into that. And actually, I met again another one of my best friends I met there. And she was still, she left there and it has gone into CAMS. But yeah, so it was a really important, I wasn't there very long. It wasn't a place for me to stay. Some people stayed for longer. I was only there 18 months, the intensity. And also, it was a long way from home and I'd got a young child. And you definitely couldn't do 9 to 5. There were very long days and it didn't fit with the family life really. So I left there. But it did really teach me that you can do both. And there's often reasons for both. And it's about, going back to that early stuff about why are you doing that? What is that going to add? And not just thinking, oh, you shouldn't restrain, you shouldn't give medication, you shouldn't. And I was probably at that point when I went there. I was only in my early 30s and I was quite, we shouldn't be doing, but actually that taught me absolutely sometimes these things are very necessary.
Yeah. And then what happens after the Tier 4 hospital from that unit?
So then I went into so I met Monica, Mike, and Bridget. And Monica and Mike ran a independent fostering agency. It was very small, and they just asked me to do little bits of work. And at that point, I'd started to do my master's at King's College, and I wanted to a research, so I needed to do some research. So
what was your master's in, Philippa?
It was in mental health of adults, children, young people and children, and an advanced award in social work. So it was a big thing. But the last year was we had to undertake research. So I'd been doing little bits around supporting foster carers with tricky behaviours and trying to help them think about it. And Bridget, Mike and Monica wanted to think about what is the best kind of training for foster carers. So I just incorporated it and I wrote a program and actually published the paper on it. And and now everybody does it. Everybody does these 9-week therapeutic parenting programs. But back then there was only another one called Fostering Changes that actually King's College had developed. And again, I was really lucky. My research supervisor was one of the people who'd been involved in Fostering Changes, and I got to go to the Maudsley and it was really nice. And my Martin, who was my lecturer again, they were really good. And I actually got a distinction on my master's. So that was was the end bit. I was like, I'm never doing anything again. I can't get better than that.
I'm done. And to say to your family, I did that on my own. Nobody helped.
Yeah. But I was then in foster care, worked in foster care. And there, I honestly, the kids and the foster carers just all that learning came together. It was just, and they were just so generous, I think, because when we were doing this stuff, what attachment really wasn't like it is now when we talk about attachment. Certainly not the brain development stuff or anything like that wasn't there. Therapeutic parenting wasn't. wasn't. Nowadays everybody does it, but at that time it was still very behavioural, very consequence led. And I was going to these foster carers and saying, do you know, let's not tell him off, let's give him a hot chocolate today, or let's just, why don't you feed them more often rather than taking away the pudding because they haven't had the. So I was asking them to do all, and they did it, Julie. And some of them, I still keep in touch with some of them now. And some of them will say, I did used to think she's just talking Alex, but I'll give it a go just to keep her, just to keep her happy. So they did it, but that was that connection, that was that all that stuff that I'd learned along the way that developed these relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they did it. And I'll tell you a story. So there's this foster carer that I'm still really close friends with now, even though I've left. And her first placement, she had two teenage girls. One was 11, one was 13. And they'd come from home, so they'd lived in a very neglectful household for quite a long time, and this was their first foster placement. And they were very streetwise, very on it, and they needed a lot of new clothes. So she'd taken them to shopping, and they'd gone into something like JD Sports or something like that. And she said, "I have a pair of trainers, whatever you want." So this one girl had said, "I'll have these." So the foster carer said, "Yeah, okay, you can have them." And so she said, "Yeah, but they're like 95 quid." And so the foster carer said, "Oh, yeah, they were, but now they're £30. So it's okay." So she said, "I don't want them then." She obviously, what we know is that she was trying to get the foster carer to say, "No, you can't have them," which would go into all that belief of you not being good enough and all those sorts of things, But once the foster carer said, "Yes, you can have them," it was like, "Oh, I don't really want them." Anyway, so she was telling me this foster carer and I said, "Go back and buy them and just put them outside her bedroom door." So she's like, "Okay, I'll do it." We've said, "I'll do it." So she did. She put them outside the bedroom door and she rang me later and she said, "Oh, she took the trainers in." I said, "Oh, is she going to wear them?" She said, "She might do, but I need to get them off the garage roof first." I was like, "Oh, okay. Do you think you could just get them off the garage roof and put them back outside the door again?" And she's like, "Oh, okay then." So they get them off the garage roof and they put them back outside the door again and in they go. And anyway, several days later, this child was going for contact and come downstairs wearing them. Didn't say anything to the foster care at all. But later on, the support worker who'd taken them let the foster carer know that she was so proud of these trainers when she'd got to the place where she was going and was really showing them off. But that was just, I suppose that's one example of where they stuck with me, that they didn't think, "Oh no, this is not working." They just stuck with me. The foster carers, the kids, when I learned therapy, they came along and they helped me, and I'd say, "This is really new, we're going to have a go." And they just stuck with me. Even when they didn't want to come, they'd still come and they'd still do it. And yeah. And so that was really powerful for me, learning about what trauma really is like in an everyday family. That, I think that's what I got there, what it's like living every day with trauma, with abuse, with neglect, and the challenges that come along with that, and the lack of services that are available. And that sometimes it felt like we were putting a sticking plaster on something. But the resilience that the kids had, the resilience that the foster carers had, and that they just went with me. I honestly, sometimes I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, "This sounds like a good idea. Well, let's have a go." And they just went with me.
I think we're coming to the last bit, which is going to be about where you're working now. But just, you say you didn't know what you were doing, but you were doing some new things, but it was all based on previous knowledge, previous experience. You weren't making it up. It wasn't pie in the sky. Let's just have a go at that. But you were using all of that experience that you'd built up in all those previous situations to create that parenting program, to think about how you were going to work differently with foster carers to the way they'd been others had worked with them in the past. And because you built things on communication, then you had their trust. Yeah, they thought you were completely bonkers. Why not punish? Why not do a behavior model? Because that's all we've been used for, and it worked fine for me, or whatever. But because of your relationship with the foster carers, they were able to trust you, which is exactly what you were then asking them to do with their children.
Yeah.
To build a relationship of trust, even though for the child, they're thinking, that's a bit bonkers. Why is she buying me trainers that are worth £95? Nobody's ever done that for me. Why is she doing that? That eventually that young person trusted that it was okay to put them on and accept them. So yeah, just in our last bit, just thinking about, where are you now?
So now I work in a really great service. So actually, when I was at the fostering agency, Meryl, who is my boss now of a place called Gateway Psychological Services, she offered me supervision around attachment and pace and all those sorts of things. So I was at the fostering agency all while my child was growing up, really, and it was great because I could be around for them. And then in COVID, I think lots of things changed, and I thought I probably need to go and do something else. Worked for myself for a little bit, but there was just so much work, Julie, and I'm not organised enough. I just like to go on a wing. So anyway, I was doing some freelance work for Gateway and ended up being employed by them. And again, the staff that I work with there just every day just teach me so much. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have new psychologists coming into our service who are coming out of their training, and they bring that into where we are now. And what I would say about Gateway is that they're really good at allowing things to float and flow around. Do you know what I mean? It's not rigid and this is what we've done and this is the way we always do it. There is some rigidity to it, and I get very irritated with all those processes and it drives me crazy. But that's just because I would be with anybody. But actually that free flowing of learning, of sharing is really, again, my practice still learns. And I work more now with adoptive families. And again, the families are just, because there's oftentimes I don't really know. And I have to be honest and say, I don't know. What I can say is, from my experience, from the other things that I've had or the other situations, maybe this might be helpful. Let's have a think. That might be something you can. And that kind of working within a family is it's that alongside them and saying, this is my knowledge, that's your knowledge. I know that I was having to think about this thing about an expert. This is one of the things I was thinking about. In the middle part of my career, there was all this thing around families are an expert in themselves, and we have to say that families are experts in their family. And actually, I was thinking about that. I've read a few things about it, and I was thinking, they are in some ways, but actually, they're coming to you to be an expert. And that's not about saying we know. But if I'm having open heart surgery, I am going to somebody who knows what they're doing. They're not going to say to me, oh, do you think we should put it in this way or that way? Should we? They're going to say, this is how it is. And I need to trust them because I am in distress or ill health and I need them to have a knowledge that I don't have. And I think that's the same for families. And that's not about saying they're not experts, but I think it's about saying together we create something.
Yes.
Together.
Yeah.
Because I think if we say you're the expert, we're putting it back on them, but they're coming to us because they don't know what to do or they're struggling with something. And our job is to provide them with information, and sometimes it is about advice and about maybe go away and do this. It might not work, but have a go and come back and let's see that. So they are coming for some level of expert knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, that phrase. And I remember when I was fostering an adoption agency, that was very often what we were encouraged to speak with families about. And the way I got round it, because I knew I had to use some of those phrases, was they know the day-to-day routine of their children very well. They know what they like to eat, how they go to sleep, what toys they want to take to school, the things they dream about. They are the expert, as in they know their child really intimately and really well. And when they come to us as the professional, yeah, absolutely. They need something from us. And that something can be, let's look at this together. And then how can I use my previous experiences and the studying that I've been privileged to do? How can I use that to help this family who haven't read the books and the articles and written the essays and done the research and all the stuff that I happen to have done as part of my career? But absolutely not for us not to be shy of our expertise, to not be shy of what we know. It's like I have an accountant, and I feel really weird saying I've got an accountant, but actually I get to a point in my tax return and think where I really don't get it. I don't understand it. So I do need to employ somebody every now and again to say, oh, did you know about this? And I don't know. But I need their expertise and their university studies and the books they've read. And I've got a leak under my sink this morning. Now I know how to change a tap and I know how to do a few things, but this is really big. And I need to call somebody who really knows how to take a whole cupboard out and redo the whole thing, because that's beyond my expertise.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking back to the beginning of our conversation where you were very nervous about having the focus on you. And you've told your story of your career through the people who've influenced you. And I could list all those people. I've jotted them all down because I'm sure I'll hear more about them. Do you see yourself as an expert?
No, and that actually, as you were talking, that was the one thing that was coming back. Is that really, that goes back to full circle. I still every day have that imposter syndrome. Every day, I think they're gonna realize. Somebody's gonna realize she really doesn't know what she's doing. And yeah, but I also am very grateful, and it's hard to hold, and that's the and both, isn't it? Because there's part of me that really still feels like that there's this imposter syndrome and that I don't have value to some things. Like when I started going onto the Theraplay steering group, I really didn't feel like I had a voice to have there. I didn't really feel like my knowledge or experience would be valuable within that community, and nobody made me feel like that. That was about me and about what I feel inside. So I have that bit. The other bit is that I have all this amazing contact with all these amazing kids and families, and I can see the growth that they have. It makes me cry now. And I can see the growth that they have, and I can see the part that small part, but the part that I played in that. And I have this week a foster carer that I used to work with. has messaged me to say, I wanted you to be the first to know because some advice that you gave us has led to this for this child. And this is what we did. And we held your voice in our head all the time thinking, what would Philippa say? What would Philippa say? And we've been able to hold our position. And now this is happening for this child. So I also know that I have this part. Do you know what I mean? Not a few months ago, I was coming out of where I work and a young man walked past and I knew him and he was looking at me and I was looking at him and he's saying, it's me. And I realized he was this little boy he's not a little boy now, but he was a little boy that I'd done therapy with for quite a period of time. And he just ran up and hugged me. And that for me was just amazing. Do you know what I mean? So I know that there's this other bit. Yeah. So it's hard. I balance the two. I balance the privilege and like I say, I could cry like with pleasure. Do you know what I mean? And gratefulness because of what I get to do. But yeah, still feel that imposter syndrome every day without a shadow of a doubt.
And I wonder if lots of people listening are also thinking, yeah, that's me too. I'm in this role at CAMS, or I'm running this therapy service, or I'm a student on a therapy course, or I've just qualified as a play therapist and I'm offering myself and people are paying for me to help their families. And that self-doubt is there in lots of us a lot of the time. And I often, when we're teaching with students, say, if you ever get to a stage where you think you've cracked this, that you know exactly what to do with the family, that you understand what the problem is and you understand how to solve that problem with therapy. If you ever get to that stage, then stop. That is not that's no longer the career for you. That doubt and that questioning about the practice that we're doing, but also us doing that practice. I think that's really common. There's research and papers all about the therapist's self-doubt and how useful that is, because it drives us on and I think it allows our families to feel doubtful too. Doctors who will often say, we got through the approval panel. We are approved doctors and we're making a real hash of it. And that's really shameful. It's how they can experience it. Having, whether it's imposter syndrome, doubt, whatever's going on in our heads, I think I'm really glad you've talked about it this morning because I don't think it's talked about enough.
No,
We talk about how grateful we are to be doing the job and how well we've been trained and things that excite us and good moments and those moments of pride and joy when a family comes back and says, yeah, I want you to know this. But I think alongside that, we need to think about what impact is that having on us, and that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt, I think is there, certainly in me, a lot. Even doing this podcast puts me into a huge sense of self-doubt. And you're not doubtful about that. So it can be different. But I think, Philippa, if that's okay with you, this is a good time to pause and to say thank you to Philippa. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pondering Play and Therapy. As always, please subscribe, send us comments, send us questions. Tell us if you also have imposter syndrome and self-doubt about your work with families and children, or as a parent. We'd be really happy to hear that and get this dialogue going. But for now, we're going to say cheerio and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.